Look, I got a sparkler. Wasn't that great? Tonight I want to talk a little bit about surface design for atmospheric firing. And hopefully my audio quality is okay. I just got a system resource notice. Let me know if you're not hearing me well. This is my old kiln, and I tore that down this summer. I built it in 2010 when I was in graduate school. It was a soft brick exterior and a hard brick interior, top loading soda fired kiln. Initially, the flame kind of crisscrossed across the bottom. There was a smaller kiln like that at Hood College that did the same. And unfortunately, it didn't work very well in the larger scale. The flame was all getting sucked up the chimney. And so I had to make some revisions to that design. So if you're looking for like a smaller soda kiln type design, you could go with something like this. This I changed from that cross design to bricking up these corners and putting my burners here on either side and making some channels that extended to really allow the flame to get enough oxygen before it hit the front wall, came over the pots, and then back out the chimney. And so here's some pictures of that kiln firing. I did, after I put silicon carbide shelves on top, put soft brick and ceramic fiber over top. And then I would even stack some soft brick around the corner. So, you know, the corner of it wasn't always this unstable looking, but it was just some additional soft brick piled up to kind of insulate. I decided, you know, I started wood firing a few years back with Tim Sherman. I say a few, but I think I've done like 22 firings with him or something like that. And I'd always added a little wood to my, I'm going to go back a second to my firing here. I had a little port where I could add some wood, and I would use angle iron to add a good portion of my soda. And then I would, you know, spray in a little bit towards the top for good measure to make sure I got it kind of all the way around. But, you know, I really have loved the effects of having a little more, a little deeper color. I really felt like my kiln cooled a little too quickly because it was a top loader, and I wanted to make some changes. So I got some additional brick. There was a kiln. A guy bought a house and there was a kiln there, and he's not a potter, he didn't want it. So I bought brick from him, and I still needed to get some brick from Frostburg, from the brick manufacturer out there. I still, out at Mount Savage, I still need to get a few more brick and finish things up. But this was kind of the initial idea behind the kiln, was to have a propane wood-fired hybrid. It's going to be designed so you really probably could fire it entirely with wood, although the firebox is a little small for that. And I know I'm too lazy to quite chop that much wood and fire it that way by itself. But I can use kind of as much or little as I want. And my burners are still in the back on either side of the chimney. They're going to come, the flame's going to come up under the floor. Into the firebox. The wood will be on top on a grate, and it'll flame up and come up and over the pots and out. There's 4 18 by 18 shelves, and the stacking space inside is going to be 36 by 36 by about 4.5 feet high. And then I will have some additional space. I'm actually going to have a door on an I-beam that rolls towards the kiln and bolts shut, so I don't have to break it up every time. So that'll be exciting. And I've got these little firebox doors on either side where I can add wood, and ultimately I'm going to add my baking soda on boards and throw it in there. And then I've got, this drops down and has an opening here that's 2 bricks wide and 3 bricks high. So I should be able to rake out coals and things like that too, if I want to. And I do have some little ports on the front for that in case I need to get more oxygen or pull some coals out. So these are the burner channels as they were coming together. So you can see I had cinder block on either side, put my soft brick on top of that, made these soft brick channels and did the whole soft brick floor, and then put hard brick on top of all of that. And so my channels here that the flame will come through And then we cut these on an angle so the flame would kind of open out into this firebox. And then the grate goes over top this as 5 iron bars as a grate for the fire. And so you can see here's where we'll add the wood. Here's where my door is, and we'll get one that rolls to that and shuts. So flames coming from back here, going underneath the floor, coming up, the wood's being added, everything's combusting, it's going to go up and then come back down and out and up the chimney that still has a few more steps to go. So decoration wise for my work, there's kind of 2 things that I've been doing to add to the surface effects. One of them is Mishima, which is kind of an inlay. And then the other is using vinyl stencils to create images on the ware. And I primarily use black velvet underglaze, and I use the white velvet underglaze. Primarily inlaying the black and doing the stencils with the white. Maybe that'll change. You could kind of mix it up. But these are kind of those examples. And I either will dip my piece in a flashing slip when it's leather hard, just a really thin wash of a flashing slip, nothing too thick like this one, or I'll go for clay bodies that flash without that needing that, like these guys. And so Troy, when I was really struggling to try and find the right tool for this, I found these brass tips. They're for a wood burning kit. And I just found that they did the best job for what I wanted. I wanted a thin line, but not quite as thin as an X-Acto blade would do. I wanted something that I could control more like a pencil, where, if I did a circle, the blade, the X-Acto blade doesn't move. So, the quality of that line changes. You really have to kind of rotate the blade, and maybe I'm just not that skilled. I don't know. God bless the people who can use them. It just hasn't worked for me. So I came to Troy and I was like, hey, I have these tips, and I'm just kind of looking for, some type of tool that I can use for those. And the back end of the tool, which I don't have on the screen here, also has a point on it cut out of the wood for a different type of engraving. It's good for signatures. So it's more like a pyramid shape. So what I'll do with my pieces is when they're leather hard, somewhere between cheddar and Parmesan cheese consistency, I will wax them. I know some people don't do it that way, but I find I really end up wiping away most of my underglaze if I don't. So I just prefer this. It also softens the surface of the piece. If your piece is chalky dry and you add the wax is going to chip off. So it's not going to work out. But if the piece is just, maybe a little bit stiffer than I'd like to carve it, just adding that wax softens it just a little bit, and it really works very well. I do thin my wax down with a little bit of water, and you can see I've used a couple different types of wax for this. This is the Aftosa wax. This is the Forbes, and I've also used the standard. In all cases, I find I add a little bit of water to thin it a little bit, so it's not quite so stiff. And so I'll carve through the wax and get my pattern, and then I will brush the underglaze, not even at its full thickness. I'll add some water to it and thin it down a bit, and I'll brush it over top and then let it mostly dry. And then I'll wipe it away with a really fine textured sponge. I don't want anything that's really gonna kind of wash away my wax or corrode away the image that I've tried to put in there. So I got a little video here of me wiping it away. You'll see I flip the sponge over. I never go back over it with like the same part of the sponge, because I'm just like a damp paper towel and just kind of so that, and you can see there's still a little streak there. You're just going to take away your design. So you got to kind of work quickly and gently to make that stay. It's going again. All right. There we go. So these are some pieces that, I've already completed that. And now they're drying. So that's our completed design on that. There's another plate with some inlay. and some cups that I've recently done. You know, some of these designs are designs that I found on different objects, like a pillow, or, you know, I found it somewhere on a sign, or maybe even a piece of graphic design. And I go, hey, I'm kind of interested in that. And so, you know, initially, I might even copy it directly. You can see there's a little bit of red on this. I have this Serral transfer paper. The red one burns out. And I can literally take a design and put it on top of the red transfer paper and gently trace kind of the outline. With the clouds, I've gotten to the point where I just kind of trace that outer edge and then I can do the rest. But I want it straight, and I want it, you know, to kind of make sure it follows some of the design principles that I initially liked about the image. So, you know, sometimes pre-tracing a little bit of the outline or a portion of the design can be helpful in me making sure that, you know, it's on the pot straight. I don't end up like starting this up here and going downhill because I'm not paying attention. I'm trying to wrap it around a mug. So that can be helpful for the design. And, you know, over time, you might find that your designs evolve and eventually you're freehanding something kind of different. But these were some pieces that I've been working on recently. And these are some pieces that are fired with the Mishima design. So it's really interesting depending on, you know, maybe how much wood ash or how much soda hits these pieces, how very different they can be, whether or not you have some flashing slip on them or it's a raw clay body that, you know, flashes nicely can make a difference. Even your glaze liner can make a difference. Those Chinos, especially the ones that are high in soda ash, you know, are just adding to the sodium content, and they're kind of actually that some of that sodium is outgassing through the clay. And so it can really add to, you know, what's going on the pot and make things interesting. You can see kind of like how much soda do I get? Or, you know, is this part of the pot facing where the soda is being added if you're going for something more directional, which is what I like. So, you know, when you put in wood and soda kind of in one section of the kiln and it's getting drawn across everything versus kind of a misting spray that might go everywhere, you're going to have areas where you have more soda and less. And where you have more, you're going to have this juiciness, and you might even see your design run, especially on porcelain. I find it will kind of bleed out and drip. But, you know, the converse of that is that you get the flashing on that backside that gets less soda. So you kind of get that nice balance. How often do I get that juicy black surface? Well, that's like the you know, the bottom front shelf of the kiln is, you know, kind of a sweet spot for that kind of a thing. That soda gamma that Tim has is actually where this guy was. This was, I believe, in the front of one of my firings in my old kiln. But this was in Tim's soda gamma, and that one, he gets a lot of juicy black. There's just a ton of wood. There's not a lot of place for oxygen to get in. And it's a very highly reduced environment throughout the soda firing, and it really pulls a lot of black. So it can be really interesting. You can kind of see, you know, the images showing through, and then where you get the really thick soda, it's kind of running. On some of the porcelain, I found that, you know, if you get this really nice gray, and you have enough of it that it's kind of pulling some of that black underglaze out, it's leaving the white line behind. And that's the clay body. I've seen it on stoneware too. It's not quite as apparent as it is on this porcelain piece, just because the contrast between the gray and white is so stark. But that can be really exciting. And then, you know, if you're a fan of like a crisper, cleaner look, there's a juicier side on the other side of this one. You know, maybe you turn your design toward the back and let that juicier side be a side that maybe doesn't have as much design on it if you don't want all your design work to be destroyed. Over time, I've come to embrace the partial destruction of my design. But you know, there are some things that maybe you point that portion to the back of the kiln. Let's see, advance these slides. So just so I'm not only talking to the atmospheric fired audience entirely, these design concepts could be used in oxidation too. So these are cone 6 porcelain with Mako underglaze. Again, I did the same thing. I waxed, I carved out, I used the black velvet. I bisque fired them, and then I took the Mako stroke and coats and applied them in the design. I believe it's an Amico Celadon on the interior, and then they were fired to cone 6. So there's, you know, application at all temperatures and atmospheres for these types of techniques. The next technique I'm going to talk about are vinyl stencils. I have a silhouette vinyl cutter. And so I found that, you know, I'm able to take pictures or, you know, just general images that I like and cut them out in vinyl and then apply them to my pot. So I'm going to show a quick little video here on how that's done.
All right, step one, I'm going to take, in this case, some frogs that I cut out from my vinyl cutter, and I'm going to cut them out more. Apply them all together. So maybe I'll keep these two together and put this one separate. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my transfer tape. I have a piece here that I've actually managed to use once and can hopefully use again. So I'll take a piece of that. And I'll start with just my single frog here. So I'm going to take this transfer tape to apply it to the front of the frog here like this. Put that really well so it sticks. And then I want to peel the backing off of my vinyl.
So the purpose of the transfer tape is to not distort your vinyl. It'll allow you to take it off the backing.
All right. So essentially, instead of cutting out like the positive of this frog, I cut out the negative so he became a stencil. So the part that's actually going to get the design is the the frog itself, not the area around the frog. So I'm going to sit in there. My little cup here, I want to take a clean, damp sponge. And I want to wipe down my bisqueware first. Make sure I get all of that dry.
Oh, I paused it by clicking. What vinyl cutter do I have? I have a Silhouette Cameo 3. I've had it for a couple years now.
Dust off the piece because that'll keep your vinyl from sticking to it. Now, in this case, I'm using Amico's white velvet underglaze, and so this doesn't actually stick, so I could even put the frog on the bottom of this pot if I wanted to. It wouldn't matter where I put it. It's not inclined to stick like another underglaze might. All right, so I'm going to take my frog and let's see, we'll position him sideways on this cup. Press the vinyl down. I'm going to do a really good job of making sure that my vinyl sticks down so that I get a good impression of my frog. Sometimes ribbing your pot while you're making it, you know, and using a metal rib or one of the rubber ribs that you might have might help make a really nice smooth surface for your vinyl to stick down on. So I'm stuck here, and I'll take my transfer tape away. Sometimes
so fast forward to me getting him to stick.
I get him stuck down pretty well, and you may even need to use a rubber rib or your fingers to kind of make sure he's sticking really well. Then I'll take a brush, and I'll get some of my underglaze on my brush here. I'll go ahead and apply the underglaze. Stencil. Be careful not to go over the edges. You could leave yourself a little more room if you're worried that you might go over the edge. You can wipe off and apply the underglaze before you fire again and be okay. If you wanted to do a bunch of layers of these, and you were afraid that maybe one layer might kind of smear another layer, you can bisque your pieces multiple times. So you could apply a layer of underglaze, biscuit, apply another layer, and really kind of build up some surface if you wanted to. All right, so I don't necessarily have to wait for this to dry to pull the vinyl up. I'll just find an area where I can grab it. Up there. And there's our frog. Okay.
So I did use some paper stencils and apply them to leather hard or close to bone dryware as well. And I just found that for me, I had an easier time applying the vinyl to the bisqueware, but I know that there are people who use paper stencils for using slips on like leather hardware who are very successful too. I just found this to be a method where I had a little more control and could wash it off if I hated it. So.
All right, step one, I'm going to take, so once I get him stuck down pretty well, and you may even need to use a rubber.
There we go. All right. So let's talk about the work a little bit. So here are some plates that I've used the white velvet underglaze for. The cherry blossom design was a design that I found and cut out the reverse with the vinyl cutter. This was a combination of a couple different designs. I grabbed a COVID molecule and kind of edited that online. It was a graphic of a COVID molecule, but I did some editing to it. I found some waves and some bubbles and kind of added those to kind of give the appearance of kind of the waves at the beach. And then there was this guy who was dressed as the Grim Reaper and sitting in lifeguard stands at the beach in Florida early during COVID. And I just found him really fascinating. So I found a photograph of him and kind of reverse cut out that shadow and applied it to the plate. So here's some more examples of the vinyl stencils, the frogs jumping on this plate. And then I've got my COVID molecules and my mask on the cup there. If you wanted to use this for oxidation, this is just a brown cone 6 clay. And I used a stencil, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, for one of my friends for her birthday. And then I put a white liner glaze inside. And then I took a wood-fired cup and I put this stencil of these little dragonflies and I put gold luster all over them and luster fired it. And that was really successful too. So, there's a lot of different applications for this stenciling that can be really fun. And I kind of like the idea, especially with something like these dragonfly, having lots of small things kind of, I put them in a pattern and then, apply that. It's kind of fun too. And so I've been combining the effects, the vinyl stencil and the Mishima. This one was a cut paper stencil. It was actually like a paper punch that you could buy that had this pattern to it that I put a slip over. I've done that with flashing slips too. So don't be afraid to the white underglaze is really nice because if the pot flashes, it pulls it through, but it's more matte. But if you can do that just with a flashing slip and get a different effect too, and that can be really fun. This one was a vinyl stencil with the white velvet and same here, but these two plates. This is a porcelain. This is a really light colored stoneware. Don't think either of those had flashing slip applied to them, whereas these two did. But you can kind of play around. If you're going to use the flashing slip, when the piece is leather hard, dip it in a thin wash of flashing slip and let that dry. And then apply your wax and do your Mishima and then bisque fire and then use your stencil. So you can really set that up. So yeah, I just kind of have some out of the box flashing slips that I like to use that aren't necessarily recipes I picked up, Margaret, but after my thesis work, I just decided that, somewhere between 70 and 80% clay and 20 and 30% flux works really well. I really like tile 6 clay because it gives me that more yellowy, sort of yellowy orange versus like the more brown. So that's this. This is a 80% tile 6 and 20% nepheline cyanite mixture. And again, I apply it pretty thin. More like a thicker wash than like a thin glaze. I find that even on bisqueware, if I apply some flashing slips too thickly, that after my bisque firing, some of it's like crumbling off, and I kind of hate that. So I try to be really thin with those. I also kind of want it to look like it's part of the pot, not necessarily like a glaze. But yeah, I can send you a link to some proportions to try. I do put it on before bisquing. There are 1 or 2 slips out there that people use after the bisque that I'm aware of. I think Bauer is one. And then the other would be that Matt Long one. I can't think of the name of it off the top of my head, but I know some people using those after bisque, but I do all mine leather hard. You can spray it too if you're having trouble with dipping. Spraying a thin coat of that flashing slip can work too. Let's see. The crowns. So these are one version of a crown. It's essentially just an open ring thrown on the wheel head. And then I've carved out these little divots here. I know some people come in under this side and carve out the underneath part too to let more air flow through. But the idea is essentially to raise your piece up. So you can see on this one came out of the kiln. I haven't taken the wads off of it yet. So I put wads on the points of the crown, and I also put wads directly underneath those wads on the bottom of the crown because I don't want it to stick to the shelf and I don't want it to stick to my pot. On this one, you can see these wads I then glued shells on top of, and then I sat probably a plate on top of this one like this. So this is the upside down. When I flipped over the crown to see how my plate looked, there it was. And so I soaked it in water to get the shells to dissolve enough to be able to pull it away. But this is a really great method for making sure that you've kind of elevated your piece enough to get some airflow underneath, because you want to get some soda in there, but not so much that you kind of destroy your image. The bottom of this plate is not very interesting. It's covered in wood ash and it's just kind of yellowy brown. But because I hid it from the flame and it only got a little bit of soda, that's when you get those really beautiful colors. So you look at the bottoms of your pots, you're like, this is the best part. Well, I want that to be the front. Other types of pieces that could be fired on a crown, you could still use that 5-point crown, but only have 3 wads on it for something oblong like this. You could also take a post or a brick and just put like a big wad on it and like fire a bowl or a cup upside down on it like I did with this guy. I would love to say that I hand collect the shells, but honestly, Troy, when Mary Bowron passed away, Tim Sherman got basically all of her shells, and she just had bins and bins of them. So far, in firing with him, I've been able to use the shells that she had. I've noted that some shells, really, some types of shells, not the ones he has, but some types of shells I've used in the past have kind of eaten into my porcelain more than I would like. And I know some people who've had shelves just permanently stick. So I think you need to be careful about the types of shells that you have. My recollection is that she has cockle shells in those bins of different sizes, and they've worked really well. So I would probably take the time to go ahead. I have bought a few, or have found some shells that I want to try just for fun, to say I found this and I fired this on the shell. But generally, I think you're probably better off, maybe buying a big bag of some shells that might work versus something that might stick to something that you've spent a lot of time on. Questions? I know we had some as we were going along. Yes, that's the beautiful thing. If I can get the wads off, I can reuse it. And I would love to use them as many times as possible. Occasionally you have one, you just, it gets warped, or, you just can't get the wads off, and eventually you toss them. But yeah, I've reused them multiple times. So, and you need to make sure you have the right size. So I try to make sure that my wads line up with the foot of my plate so that I don't have any warping. So you may decide to make a number of different size crowns depending on the size of your pieces. And I don't, Troy, my friend does. And I love them. When I go over there, they're very exciting. But we've always talked about maybe putting in a koi pond. But we do have another friend that has a koi pond, and she's in the country like we are, and she finds that there's a blue heron that really loves her koi. So now I'm hesitant. I'm like, oh no, I'd be really devastated if a bird came along and ate them. And I have lots of different kinds of birds here for sure, birds of prey as well. Any other questions? There's a lot to explore in this area, and I certainly think, you could use terra sigillatas, or you could use colored slips, or you could use, underglazes, or you can use, flashing slips or commercial glazes. Do I use glazes instead of on the outside? Mostly no. Sometimes if I fire with Tim and I'm firing like wood in the front and soda in the back, I'll make some pieces that are glazed. I like to use Temaku. I love chinos. But generally for my soda fired pieces, there's only glaze on the interior. Sometimes I'll use chinos interior and exterior. I like the gold chino. It's in John Britt's book. I like a different Guston chino. It's not the crawl one, it's the other one. And I have two others that I got from Hood College. One's called Dressang. That's almost a whitish chino that sometimes it gets peachy, which is really nice. And then there's one called Horseman's that I like too, that can get a nice blush. For liner glazes, I use white salt, so I don't actually add any iron to it, but it turns yellow most of the time anyway in anything that's not a porcelain. I love Pinel Celadon, which is it's made with Barnard clay as the colorant. And I happen to have a bucket of Barnard, so feel very fortunate to be able to use that and get that beautiful green. And what else do I use glaze-wise? Interior. Primarily it. Phil's White's a pretty popular white. I haven't mixed that for myself, but they have that up at Tim's. And then I've been making a couple other liner glazes to try. I have no idea who gets credit for Horseman Shino. I guess the Apocalypse, all 4 of them, right? But yeah, no, for glazes, I have a couple that I'm experimenting with now. I do like to, if I'm gonna do a little bit of glaze on the outside, like some Temmaku or something like that in wood, or maybe in the very back of my soda kiln. Now that I have a larger kiln, I might try some Temmaku. I'll spray a little bit of Strontium Crystal Magic on that, which is Stephen Hill's version that's revised from a Tom Coleman recipe. It's been revised again by Mike Strumbus to take out, I think he took out the lithium added spodumene. So no, he took out the strontium, but not the lithium, I think. Anyway, I had Ryan Rakshan kind of re-whipper that one to take strontium and lithium out, just because the lithium's so expensive these days. So I want to experiment with that too. But that's something that could give you some nice runs and crystals and things like that. So, you know, never stop playing. It's always worth throwing an experiment, at least one in every kiln mode. Other questions? Thank you, Margaret. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for coming. I really appreciate your time. And